Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope you are all doing well at the beginning of 2021. On behalf of the Glaze, we'd like to extend a cheerful welcome to you all, and thank you for joining Sharing Global Views today. In each episode of Sharing Global Views, we meet, learn, and share thoughts and ideas with experts and leaders on different global matters. So far, we've covered many fascinating topics, including heating climate change warnings, renewable energy, good education, business innovations, the great sharing economy, finding a cure to the COVID-19, and so forth. And the show is part of Sharing Economy Initiative, which aims to make the world more sustainable step by step. You want to know more about Glaze and Sharing Global Views? Welcome you to follow us. We're all social media platforms. So Tia, how are you? What's our topic today as the first episode of the new year?
Thank you. Hello, Helena. Thank you so much. Very excited that we're having this new year. We're surely making quite a bit of progress from the events we had last year. Now we started developing this new year program. Not the first one that we're having here is going to be on education. But again, back to what we're doing here. So Sharing Global View is the program that we really want to have is for the morning tea time for Americas, and a good lunch tea for the Europeans, and for the Asian countries, probably that's just after dinner. So it's more a tea conversation, a means to really sharing good ideas around the world from global leaders to students and everyone in between. It's really about having an idea and having questions to come aboard. So this session is actually having about 15 minutes of 20 minutes of speech, and then the follow up with lots of Q&As as long as the time allows. But again, like Helena had reminded us, that you can go to LinkedIn or YouTube to ask question anytime. For anyone who wants to participate in Zoom, please also leave your question in the text box. Now, please allow me to welcome the standing chairman of the Glaze, President host Maria Figueres, to introduce the host and the event today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena and T. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends. Welcome to this first edition of Global Sharing Views in 2021. You know, we finished off 2020 with an extraordinary program in which we had our Secretary General, Ge Jun, review the accomplishments of Glaze during the past year. A challenging year, but in spite of that, many accomplishments in promoting, advancing, and broadening understanding with respect to the concepts, the pillars of a shared economy creating well-being for more peoples around the world, and at the same time taking care of our finite natural resources on the planet. We wanted to start off this year with a big bang, if I may use that expression. And that is why we thought that the issue of linking education, culture, and economic development should be at the forefront to guide our thoughts and actions during 2021. Furthermore, to show the importance of these issues and the many takes on especially education and culture that different peoples from around the world have, we chose a very distinguished discussion leader for this program, Don Héctor Villagrán, who I will formally introduce in a minute or so. We thought it very interesting that Héctor, coming from Latin America, but now for many years living in China, would be able to share with us both perspectives, a multicultural take on where we are with respect to how education and culture influence economic development. And so, Héctor, thank you ever so much for accepting our invitation to begin the year with your presentation. Héctor is a former counselor of the Embassy of Ecuador in Beijing, but he's also an honorary professor of the Beijing Language and Culture University. He's also a senior counsel with King and Capital Law Firm. He is an affiliate of the Harvard Business School Microeconomics of Competitiveness, which is what all nations are looking for. And it gives me great pleasure this beginning of the year to introduce Don, as we would say in Latin America, Don Héctor Villagrán. Héctor, you're on mute. Now you
Thank you so much, President Figueres. As I mentioned to you personally, it's a great honor to be part of this effort by GLACE because it's very important, especially in these important times, to understand the need to look into a sharing community, into a sharing world. And I've been following the actions and the future proposed by the institution. So I am very happy to join this presentation. And also especially because everyone in the world recognizes you as one of the important leaders in the world that brought about change and significant change for Costa Rica. So it's a great honor, same for Te and Elena, and also some of distinguished scholars and professors that are joining us from different parts of the world. I can see some of them joining us from the United States and others from Latin America and China. So thank you so much. I would like to start saying that the topic is a very important topic, and it's maybe I will have more questions than answers at the end of this conversation. Maybe we will ask ourselves, what should we do better? And like you said, President Figueres, I come from Latin America, and Latin America is a beautiful blend of different cultures and civilizations. And of course, we can recognize perhaps some of them, but it's not all, but some of them come from the Greek and Roman background. Greek and Roman culture play an important role in our education, in our way of behaving. The thought of liberty, the thought of democracy has deep roots into the Greek culture, and then pass on into Roman civilization. So in order to make a point and let us into a very fruitful conversation, and I hope you can participate, all of you, with your questions and also comments. I'd like to share some of my thoughts, and I have borrowed one word by former and famous philosopher, also emperor of Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius. So I have named my presentation, I have used one of his important books, which is Meditations. So I have used this title, Meditations about Education, Culture, and Economic Development in the Western Civilization during the time of COVID-19. And as a foreigner in China, I will try also to make a distinction between the actions that we have been taking in the Western world and the actions that I've seen and I have experienced have been taken in China. And maybe we can learn more about that. Even that I have mentioned before that the World Economic Forum have recognized China as the top economy for sharing, the sharing economy development. So I think all of this fits very well, and also with the important purpose and goal of this institution glaze to try to bring down the several aspects that I will be referring to related to the need or place emphasis in the need of protecting our nature and letting this civilization as we know now improve through the sharing economy. So I will use this presentation just to bring some reflections or meditations about it. And by no doubt, even though I need to clarify that one of the most important professors that I had in China, professor of philosophy, Professor Tian, said in his lecture about Chinese culture that to understand Western history, you must read Homer. And then he gave a long list of Western authors. And then students, this philosophy class asked, and how about China? How can we understand China? And then he said, one book, I Ching, The Way. You must, to understand China, you must understand the Tao. And I have reflected deeply about this, President Figueres, because yes, it is true. So I asked, what other books? And then he said, well, you need to understand the Western world, you need to read Nicola Machiavelli, and you need to read Anne Smith, and you need to, well, it's true. We have a lot of these important books, but in China, the Tao, and the Tao is about the balance, and about the balance brings the positive and negative together. You know this very well, I will not go deeper, but I will want to use this important teaching by Professor Tian, one of the most important philosophers, in my opinion, in China, and ask you to think about Homer and think about the Iliad, and most people, most scholars in previous years will always refer the Iliad or Homer as mythology. Current studies have shown that there was an important civilization going on, as we all know, in the Greek islands, but also in the pharaohs in Egypt. And it had seemed to be only brought by the Bible that there was a Hittite Empire. But now we know that there was a Hittite Empire at that time, and that Troy, the city of Troy, was located at the Hittite Empire. And the main purpose of this conflict was to control the known world at that time. And I must be very respectful for our Chinese viewers, because as we know, in the Western world, when we talk about history of civilization, we concentrate ourselves on Western civilization. At that time, also very important events and development happening in China. But as I said, I will focus on our cultural background and why I think we should go into a deep meditation into this new world that might arise after COVID-19. And yes, so there's this perhaps epic tale, this epic poem by Homer, most important author in the ancient world. And in this epic poem, you can see now there's the map about the location and also the importance. But we can remember some of the names that participated, and some of these names now are the names of some heroes that we up to now revere and remember. as part of our Western civilization. And of course, one of them is Achilles, and another is Héctor, and we're very lucky to have Elena also in our team. So this is part of what some historical facts that I hope we will be discovering is that these three great empires, the Greek Empire, the Hittite Empire, and the Egyptian Empire, dominated the known Western world at that time. Trade routes were very important. But we had this situation narrated by Homer. And at the beginning of the Iliad, if you recall President Figueres, you can find that there is a poem, the first poem of the Iliad, refers to a plague that have hit the Greek side, and that Achilles has become very, very angry with Agamemnon, the king of the Greek side, and he requests that Agamemnon change his ways in a very angry way, because he feels the way Agamemnon has been acting has prompted the reaction from the gods to punish the Greek side by a plague. Well, we now know that plagues are not brought by gods. They're part of our nature, as we'll see, and they have happened in the history of humanity. As I said, Homer, the most important and powerful literary figure of the Western world, describes the plague at the Greek side at the 9th year of the invasion of Troy. Finally, the gods get together, according to Homer. They reach an agreement, and they get the plague out, and the gods in the Olympus celebrate with a dinner, and everything is in peace. But as you can see in this map, everything was not in peace. If you take the historical facts, if we just leave the Iliad to the side, but we know that these three empires were fighting for dominance of trade routes in the Mediterranean Sea. But so we have plague and we have war, but we had two more events that historical facts are showing us through archaeology. The two others are natural events. That's why when I start this conversation, I mentioned the very important action by Claes to push for a better understanding and the need of actions related to environmental protection. This is a must for us now, especially in the time of a plague. It's very important. If we learn from history, this Western part of the history, we know that also there was a climate change event which brought drought and also earthquakes. So these events we cannot control. Plagues we cannot control. We can react to them, but wars we can control. So the first meditation, the first reflection about this situation related to these three great empires of the Western world in the ancient civilizations is we must try to avoid, during the time of climate change, during the time of earthquakes, and during the time of plagues, we must avoid wars. So first meditation, at this time, sharing economy. Let the people think and believe that the leadership of each of the countries will care for them, will let them grow, don't let them go poor, because this is what happened. And then massive migrations And these migrations are named today by historians the migration of the people of the sea. Some people say we don't know where they come from, but these powerful empires, these armies could not stop this massive migration. So if we learn from history, this is something we must look into, because we might have many questions. Like I said, I promised not so many answers. I promised a lot of questions for our reflections, our meditations. Okay, so this is the first part that I'd like to mention to you. The second, still in Greece, this is not mythology, and this is not part of the poem by Homer, but this is one of the most famous Greeks, Athenians of all times, and the golden era of Athens. Pericles had, with the people of Athens, had reacted to the invasion from Persia. Persians had destroyed some of the icons, like the Parthenon, other icons of Athens, had managed to get a fund, had managed to implement democracy, had managed to implement great education, had managed to have a school and share the education. But wars didn't stop. And during the Pericles, the great Pericles, we also have another event that we must remember now, which are the Peloponnese War. And I think that this war is an internal war, thinking about the Spartans and the Athenians and their allies. If you see on the north, you see Macedonia. Oh, that plays a big role, because after the war, or during the war in the year 4030, we had a very important event narrated by the father of history, Thucydides, and the narration is that during this plague, the great leader of Athens, Pericles, dies, him and his family, and there is a change of the leadership again. So war and plague bring a fatal outcome for Athens and this great leadership. And this time is where we start in the Western world. Again, I must mention that during the same time in China, we have great things happening, and great advances, and also the pandemics also affect China. So we have at this time the most important doctor, the father of medicine in the Western world, analyze the situation of the plague of Athens, 430 before Christ. So with these two events, I want to let us feel that we must go into a deeper meditation about the importance this time in the year 2021 to understand the need to, in a collective way, face the pandemic that we're currently living. We all know now that if pandemic is not solved all over the world, then we are not safe. And the same should be for the economy. If there is still lack of health in the world, if there still is lack of education in the world, if there still is a lack of prosperity for the great majority in the world, no one will be safe. So we have Hippocrates and his great teachings, especially based on the pandemics. So with this, I want to close the cycle of the Greek world and then go into the Roman world. And I say to you, I'd mentioned that I had borrowed the name of Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor from Roman Empire. his book about meditations, one of the Stoics. Great meditation. I highly recommend if you want to understand the Western world, especially for Chinese, read Marcus Aurelius. But during Marcus Aurelius' time, also we have an expansion of the Roman Empire. And if you recall, you can see at the death of Julius Caesar, the empire and the way it looks, so you see the yellow in your screens, and then at the death of the first emperor, Augustus, then with the Greek, the expansion, and then with Marcus Aurelius, then you see the red. So there's this constant movement of war, a constant movement of troops that also affect and brought up about what is called the Antonine Plague in Rome. So during this plague, again, we have a great doctor. He's a Greek-born doctor at the service of Emperor Marcus Aurelius. And as a Greek, in his writings, he recognized the greatness of Hippocrates. He says, all I learned come from Hippocrates. So this is Galenos. And there are two things also that we can learn from these pandemics, that doctors become a very important player in the world of civilization. But doctors just represent our need to have answers for these difficult times. What I feel is that during these times, health and the action of government toward a healthy environment, a healthy life, a healthy population become a must. And this is another question that I would like to leave in your mind, and maybe we can discuss this more later. And to end this era of Greek and Roman, another great emperor, Justinian. Justinian, for lawyers, is better known for the emperor that codified the law, and from the Justinian law, from the Codex, from the civil law, then we inherit all over the world. Some of the world, we say, is follows the civil type of legislations, and other follow the common law. So this comes from Roman time. So we have a great emperor. But during Justinian time, we also have another plague, and we also have another important movement of troops, because Justinian decides to reconquer the Eastern Empire, to reconquer Rome, to try to get sovereignty of Roman Empire, now located to the eastern side. And then you can see this. So another action that is very important for us to remember. And Justinian is very well known for his codex. And I like to finish this first part and then hopefully go into questions, because according to the World Health Organization, WHO data, and this is before the pandemic, we have controlled these pandemics. But even though we had control, there were some voices around the world saying that we must invest more in health, we must invest more in education, because we need to get ready for the next pandemic. And some of this data shows some of the places that they might happen, or they might occur due to different ecological aspects related to pandemics. Well, this is my presentation, President Figueres, and I like, in the moment that you feel is okay, have a conversation related to the ways that current civilization could, by learning of the aspects related to the Greek and Roman world, perhaps, just as I have seen in China, which has a very deep understanding of ancient culture, because China can look back many thousands of years, but we can too. But China can look many thousands of years back and review their written history and find ways to face this pandemic. And I have some comments about economic recovery as I've seen in China and education as I've seen in China, which will bring us more closer to the title of our presentation. So, but I wanted just to use this time to fit myself in the 20-minute slot that we have discussed previously.
Héctor, thank you very much for your historical perspective on education and development and how it has impacted civilizations, at least in the Western world. Fully recognizing, as you have said, that at the same time in China, fantastic and great events were ongoing. You know, I was interested by your first, what you call your first reflection. In other words, saying that in these times that are challenging times from a health perspective, from an economic perspective, the last thing we need is also a period of conflict, and that we should avoid conflict at all costs. And it's a very good call in a world where geopolitical tension has risen over the last years to perhaps the highest level that we have ever seen since the wall came down in Europe. It made me recall of parts of an extraordinary speech presentation which President Xi Jinping inaugurated the global agenda this week, 2 days ago in Davos, by making certain points. And he made 4 very salient points. And of those, one was that he mentioned we should abandon ideological prejudice and join in fruitful and peaceful cooperation for coexistence with mutual respect of our nations, peaceful coexistence. And then in another one of the 4 points that he made, he called and convened the world to come together to solve the challenges that we have. So very much along, these thoughts. Now, if I may, a question, and then we'll open it up to other questions. You mentioned Pericles, the golden age of Athens in the old Greece. Can you go back and trace in that time a linkage between education, culture, and development? Is that evident if you study the history?
It's the golden age of Athens because we have a great development of thinkers and a great development of industry and great development of trade. And then the Athens society will expand, will create colonies all over the Mediterranean. So the educational reform and process brought by Pericles has a very important result in the expansion of and the influence of Athens. That's why we call it the Golden Age. And I would like to link what you said and what I've just mentioned about Athens, because we, of course, in the Western world recognize the greatness of this period, but also the words of Chairman Xi, President of China, and the actions related to the recent speech given in which we are asked to meditate, to make reflections about ideology, and also asked about how to understand this special period of time. And I think great leaders like you, President Figueres, and this organization can contribute greatly to this understanding by all peoples. And the first action that I've seen related directly to economic development is the creation of the largest free trade zone in the world. Because before that moment, we had
Canada, US, and Mexico be the largest free trade zone. But governments in the Asian nations, must mention China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, on all the ASEAN countries, decided to make a historical step forward. They say, we will lower our tariff. This means something very important. This is an important message for the population. Means we will collect less import taxes. So governments will not have these resources coming in. But the outcome of this decision is that citizens in each country, state that belongs to this free trade zone, they will have the products and the services at a lower price. So by this, benefiting these economies and allowing the economies to become stronger, I think this action reflects in a very deep way the understanding of the current situation and current moment. Even though some neighboring states might have difficulties, very normal in the history of humanity, they are all together joining, no matter the ideological background. But this is not only for Asia, President Figueres. And we said, okay, we will use this part to mention the importance of economic development. And then I see the African continent, the African Union, perhaps this year creating another very large free trade zone. And then many years ago, some important leaders in the world, I will mention one of them because it's the one I remember the most. John F. Kennedy mentioned that we should unite because there was a great danger of instability because of the poverty. And he mentioned Asia, he mentioned Africa, and then he mentioned Latin America. So I have expressed my great happiness for what we have seen, and we should use this as an example. President Xi had just mentioned it in Asia, in Africa, but in Latin America, we must think deeply. Latin Americans, and many of the Latin Americans that accompany us, we must think very deeply how to also follow this path, because if we do, then we can bring peace for humanity. I mentioned in the first part of my presentation that when these events happen, and you also mentioned the importance of avoiding by all means internal or external wars, then large migrations might happen. And we don't want that. We hope that things can be carried out in a very peaceful way. Of course, I also like to mention that after pandemics and after these situations, great advances came for humanity. So also another teaching by my Chinese professors of philosophy, a great challenge, a great difficulty might become a great blessing into the future. So why? Because now we're talking about nature protection. We are talking about sharing economy. We are talking about prosperity for all. And the second part of my answer, I'm sorry, it was a little bit long, but it was so important what you mentioned, President Figueres, is the need to share for health. And in this sense, I highly recall the words of President Xi about sharing the ancient knowledge of Chinese traditional medicine. This is very important. And I hope in some moment we can also bring this topic into the conversation. And I will say that thank you for your question, President Figueres. And your leadership is very important, not only for Latin America, for all the world, and carrying out these important topics into the knowledge of the scholars and citizens that are very interested in trying to have a peaceful coexistence.
Hector, thank you very much. You mentioned the creation of the largest free trade area and the importance in terms of economy for those countries in Asia that, of course, are part of it. And it brings home the point that at Glaze, within our own small possibilities, but trying to help the world be a better place, we are embarked in a mission to invite chambers of commerce from around the world to join Glaze for free, to join our electronic platform, which is state of the art, to foment the exchange of information between chambers of commerce, chambers of industries in different parts of the world, and especially by, and to share all of this information with their membership directly, so that we can foment trade, economic activity across borders, but in a responsible way on the tenets of a sharing economy, which means really to take into consideration the environmental issues that you have mentioned in your presentation in a very central way with respect to what economic development has been in the past. In other words, moving towards a low carbon economy that creates jobs, entrepreneurship, opportunities for investment, and at the same time lowers carbon emissions, which is one of the big challenges humanity faces that we have never faced in the past. You know, in your presentation, one can learn a lot from history, is one of the conclusions that I draw from your presentation. What we have not had to face in history is climate change, or at least humanity as we know it today. And so made by our activities, climate change induced by our activities. And therefore the need to cooperate on these issues is even more important than ever. Let me open it up to our colleagues here. I see several colleagues that have joined us, and there may be a question for Héctor. You can
Yes.
you can unmute yourself and make your and just ask your question.
Yes, sir. So we got the question from audience through text. We're asking Professor that you know, it's about a time that we're actually facing a lot of challenges that we, you know, kind of can't really foresee very clearly what's ahead of us. But history can tell us a lesson. But reflecting back in the history, and the question was on Greek culture and significantly influenced Roman itself. Greek mathematics, architecture, philosophy, and Rome become the caretaker of much of Greek culture in many years. The Western Roman Empire and Europe enters Middle Age. Islamic would act a bit a bridge of this Greek culture into European Renaissance and eventually the Enlightenment. So we can learn the trace of modern views of science and philosophy back to those Greeks. What we can learn from this, Professor? That's the question.
Thank you for the question, and I think as China goes into a very important understanding of the ancient culture, I've participated in several events in which very young kids in the level of elementary school and then high school are taught about the ancient Chinese culture. I think this is one of the elements, and President Figueres might recall it also, that we have lost in our Western civilization education. I hope we can go back into these values and principles, because just like I did now in just 20 minutes, we call the history of the ancient Greece civilization and Roman civilization, and we can easily find pandemics, and easily find that pandemics change societies and change the way people behave, and then the world becomes different. So I think this is the best, perhaps, example. And also, I would like to say, referring to what President Figueres mentioned, for me personally, the most important aspect in which we will be working as citizens is global warming. That's the most important. No matter if you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or engineer or expert in mathematics, global warming is the most important factor. And of course, there are some of these areas in which we can control because we have been acting very aggressively against nature, and others that belong directly to nature, and we should live according to nature. At the end, perhaps my greatest meditation is that perhaps ideology didn't bring social changes so much as we thought. Maybe nature had been the great cause of social change and social improvement throughout humanity. That would be my answer.
Héctor, thank you so much. Just on this last note that you mentioned, you know, this presentation of yours, which we thank you for, has been on education, culture, and development. And we should have probably included climate or environment as a factor of development along the lines that you have mentioned. It has played such an important role throughout history in the development of different parts of the world. Well, Héctor, thank you so much. We're running out of time. We want to thank you again for having joined us, for having shared your reflections on ancient history and the lessons that we can learn from that in terms of linking education, culture, and development, and seeing how we use that, use the word meditation, seeing how we meditate on these concepts as we go forward in a year which still has, of course, important challenges ahead, but we all hope will be a much better one than 2020. So with that, friends, we come to the close of this program. Thank you ever so much for having joined us. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, Wednesday the 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, for another chapter of our Global Sharing Views conversations. Thank you so much, Héctor. Thank you so much. Que tengan un lindo día. Have a great day or a great evening, depending on where you are. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias.